Hi there, welcome to today's live session. And today I'm going to be talking about all the annoying things about being trauma informed and being a trauma informed sensitive practitioner. So just before we get started, I'm going to explain about my journey because I discovered trauma informed practice, and I've had to do a lot of reading and be coached and supported by other trauma informed experts. And quite surprisingly, throughout my doctorate training, throughout my degree and clinical experience, actually we didn't touch upon trauma-informed practice, and it was never an approach that we looked at. A lot of the training was focused on cognitive behaviour therapy, behavioural approaches, psychodynamic, systemic family therapy based, and there were some attachment-based approaches in there, which kind of links and relates to trauma-informed practice. So when I qualified as a clinical psychologist, a lot of my work started off in forensic mental health services, so working with high-profile individuals that have committed really serious offences and also got mental health difficulties. And a lot of the work was focused on risk assessment, but also working therapeutically with these individuals to assess of how we can support to minimise risk of reoffending again, to support their mental health difficulties, but also reduce risk in the future and manage risk in the community. And when I'd start working with a new individual, so we'd call them patients, a lot of the work would start off with an assessment and the understanding in terms of their life history, their early childhood experiences, going over in terms of the offending behaviour that they had engaged in, what led up to that, the actual incident itself, and then also previous work that they've engaged in. And actually reflecting back, a lot of the time they would have already been through that with other psychologists, so I wouldn't be the first psychologist that they'd seen. And actually, they kind of talk about it like the weather. And I guess it's because they've been exposed to it so often, asked to tell their story quite a lot of the time as part of their process of going through the services, or maybe stepping down from high secure to medium secure, or to get access to other support, or be moved to hospitals around the country. And therefore, a lot of the work that we did, I actually started to recognise that this wasn't about asking people to retell their stories or as gathering facts. The work came in developing that therapeutic relationship with the individual, and then focusing on actually other work in terms of bodily-based approaches that would support them to be able to regulate themselves, to experience co-regulation, think about relationships with other people that they had for their previous experiences, whether that's with family life, but also within the system, and the staff that they've been working with quite frequently changed. So as we started to develop the Healing Together programme and work with children affected by domestic abuse, quite quickly actually realised children were invested in the relationships that they built with facilitators. Yes, the programme was great. They enjoyed the resources, the activities, but a lot of the feedback from the children came about this relationship that they built with facilitators, how great our facilitators were, how confident it helped them to overcome confidence in terms of speaking with a group and seeking support. But also, when I started to hear about and how the children talked about the work that we was presenting with them, it wasn't about actually changing their thinking style. So a lot of the work around cognitive behaviour therapy, you might start thinking about how to restructure your beliefs or your core beliefs, and then thinking about if you change how you think, that changes how you feel and how you behave. So this journey of trauma-informed practitioner and thinking things more from a bodily-based approach, from a neuroscience and attachment relational-based approach, is like literally putting on contact lenses and constantly having these contact lenses in your eyes, and you're looking at the world, you're looking at how people talk, you're looking at people's behaviour, you're looking at systems in a completely different way. And that's great, but also it's not so great. And let me tell you the reasons why. When I went on holiday, summer holiday, I was just sat by the pool, and you kind of think, great, going on holiday, going to be relaxing. But every space that I was in, because I had this trauma-informed lens on, I actually found it quite difficult and quite upsetting to be around. So we had children, so parents, carers talking to children and bribing them. So if you don't do this, you're not going to get that, or threatening them that if you keep behaving like this, we're going to take you home, we're going to take you out of the pool, and tone of the manner and the way. So some people literally being physically dragged, so children being dragged out of areas, of spaces that they were enjoying to be in. And then also some of the language that parents and carers were using around, you're making me feel sad, you're doing this to me. And in a frustration, so nobody was doing this intentionally. It was their way of kind of either voicing that they was feeling frustrated, they was feeling maybe angry or sad towards what the behaviour the child was displaying, or that they'd reached their threshold, their capacity to be able to stay quite calm and quite, I guess, have that co-regulating opportunity with their child. But then it also led me to think about actually its generational experiences as well. So kind of our views on parenting and the language that we use and kind of who's in power here. So it's the adult, charged for listening to the adult, for example. And this isn't, also made me think about, actually, because I'm a new parent as well, that actually adults are not trained to be parents. Parents, we do what we can with the information that we have. But I also saw a child with special educational needs, whose parents talked about him having autism, and they were struggling with being in a complex, all this exciting stuff going on, lots of water, lots of people, lots of new experiences, and obviously that was quite overwhelming for this young person. And therefore, when you have this new trauma-informed lens on, you start to think about the impact it has on children. So, and also then you kind of think, well, actually, if somebody did that differently, probably the outcome is going to be different too. And the other annoying thing is with that is, you can't step in and say anything. It's not your place. Actually you can't interfere. If you're in social situations, you also know that probably people don't want to hear it and not ready for it, or they might take it as that you're judging them or criticizing them. So that's not going to be helpful either. So it's actually quite difficult to kind of be a bystander and actually witness it and kind of have this new knowledge and this new insight into a trauma-informed approach. But also thinking about it, when we think about a trauma-informed approach, I always say that it's a real shame where we currently are, that children or adults have to experience trauma to be treated this way. Why can't we all be treated using this approach and kind of communicated in this way? Why is it that we have to wait for people to experience trauma to become victims of something before they get access to a trauma-informed sensitive practitioner? So that's just something else that I've been thinking about. And then, for example, you go to the supermarket and you see the same things play out. You see relationships with food starting to play out with between parents and children, and kind of what goes into the shopping trolley. Siblings maybe fighting over who's having which food, and kind of more being picked up, so they've got one of each of things. And again, the same situation of kind of lots going on, parents getting frustrated, the caregivers getting frustrated, and they're reaching their capacity and not having the strategies really to think about actually noticing that those early signs themselves, so they can start to engage bodily based regulation activities to calm their body, to calm their brain, and think about, okay, take a breath, regulate themselves so they can engage then with the child. So what happens then is the child is dysregulated, the adult's dysregulated, and then obviously that just escalates over time, and you start to then see children on the floor, parents feeling really frustrated, quite anxious, and then it just escalates from there. Now, the other annoying part of it is when it's in your home life as well. So, for example, if you, so when I go to nursery, for example, and I go and do the pickup and I kind of ask for some feedback of how's it been today, my typical response that I get is he's been good today, or he started to find his voice, I guess, started to communicate. So he was even described as cheeky, because he's doing things of kind of exploring the world as how I see it, and kind of seeing, have you seen me? So I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to look around and see if you see me do this, and kind of give a cheeky smile. But also little phrases that people have been saying. So it's been good or it's been bad. And then I'm kind of thinking, well, what does that mean? And how are you judging and how are you placing these labels on such young babies already, in terms of what good looks like and what bad looks like? And again, it's very difficult to challenge or kind of say, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Because it's so ingrained, and it's kind of typical automatic feedback that happens, that people are not thinking about the language that they're using and the direct impact that can have on children. So if the child is being described as bad, then obviously then they start to think about themselves, if actually I'm a bad person, or thinking about what do they need to be good. Or it might be so suppressing emotions as well. So if they're feeling quite angry or anxious, etc., and that's been labelled as bad, because the behaviour that's communicating and showing through their emotions is started to be labelled as bad by adults, and they need to, then they start to think about it themselves. And it might happen unconsciously, so it's not directly the process that takes place consciously, but it becomes a way of safety survival mechanism for them. So through kind of what us as adults are doing, and it's typically adults do it because of their own experiences, or it's because we want children to meet the adults' expectations, or it's because it's easier for adults as well. So if children are a certain way, behave a certain way, say certain things, and it actually becomes easier for adults, that actually long term we start to impact children, and not necessarily do we stop to think about what impact that has. One of the things that we see quite typically, again, in different systems, it might be use of consequences and rewards, or how food is used. Now, we all know food is a basic need. And then if we start to use food as a way to punish or reward children, it might be, well, if you do this, you get ice pops today. If you don't do this, you're not going to get dessert. We start to then think about actually the impact of food has on the relationship. So the relationship the child has with food, how they perceive food, but then also that long-term relationship that it can impact on. And that's quite a conversation I have quite often in the education setting, so in schools, particularly around dining lunchtime, because that's unstructured time, so children already find that difficult. But also you've got dining assistants that might be using food as a way to manage children, and I guess control the behaviour that they're displaying by using food, say for putting children at the back of the queue, or not being able to have seconds, for example, the behaviour that they've been displaying. And these are real examples that I've seen in schools, so these are not kind of things that we're making up, these are actually things that are taking place. So when you are trauma informed, and when you're actually being trauma informed, and when I say being, it's because it's a way of being, it's not something you're doing to, it's not something that you can stop and switch off, it actually becomes a part of you. So you start to notice yourself in terms of your own bodily experiences. So if I'm starting to feel anxious, I can feel that in my body, you're taking actively note of it, whereas before I probably wasn't so conscious, so aware of how my body was feeling, and therefore it displayed alternative ways. So whether it's through skin conditions, through exhaustion, sleeping quite frequently, or overeating. So as you start to become trauma informed in terms of being as a practitioner and very sensitive about it, you start to notice in terms of your own bodily responses, you start to notice how you feel around other people. And also that can go against you, because if somebody's boring you or somebody's irritating you, quite quickly you know, but you still might be in a social situation or a work situation where you have to keep going along with it and go against how your body's feeling about it. So that's quite interesting when you're in that situation. And also then you've got the system. So you know that the system's got a lot of work to do. It takes absolutely years and years and probably decades for the system to catch up. Therefore, you're working in a system that isn't on the same level, or trying to change, or you're working with people that you've got a certain number that are on board and kind of championing the same approach. And then you're also working with people that are actually totally against this approach. It doesn't align with their own values or their own understanding. And therefore, you completely get this jar of kind of where you become finding yourself have to become quite flexible, because you know this is a process, so you need to be quite patient. And if you're somebody like me where you're not patient all the time, then actually that's quite frustrating as well. So really think about, in terms of a notice and understanding yourself, actually by becoming a trauma-informed sensitive practitioner, it also has drawbacks, because in your own personal life, places that you are, people that you'll see, conversations that you'll just hear passing by. So when I'm coming out of the office, there was a child, and this gentleman sat on the brick wall, and the child had stood in dog poo. And the child was quite distressed over it, quite rightly so. He wasn't happy about it. But the adult there, he got really frustrated, and he was saying to the child really unkind things. And the child was responding, and the adult was kind of joking about it, but really saying like really nasty, unkind things. And you could see the child like escalating in terms of like he's starting to cry more, felt more distressed. And I just wanted to go over and like just ask, "Are you okay? Or will you be okay? Let's help you clean this up." And instead, the child was left to clean it up on his own, whilst the adult is sat next to him making these comments. And I had to just keep walking on by. So it also feels like you're a bystander that's not actively doing anything to support people to change their attitudes or kind of think about things in an alternative perspective. But I know at the same time, I can't save the world, I can't change everybody. And therefore, that's what's remarkable about the Healing Together programme, is that we're able to actively upskill frontline practitioners, offer them training, offer them the support and the resources, the ongoing support to help them to become trauma-informed sensitive practitioners. And that's my way of trying to build a community, trauma-informed sensitive practitioners, but also highlighting the drawbacks of it and knowing the impact that it has outside of your working environment. So I'm just going to hang around to see if anybody's got any questions, any reflections, any thoughts on what I've said today. But if not, I look forward to joining you next week. Got loads of exciting new news coming up, so I'll be jumping on LinkedIn Live just to share those with you as well, about some new partnerships and some new work that we're doing within different settings. That's with children's residential settings, working directly with parents and carers to resource them to support their children affected by domestic abuse. And yeah, hope you have a lovely weekend and enjoy the sunshine. So yes, Carrie, thank you for sharing as well that you struggle to switch off the trauma-informed lens. I don't think it's possible to switch off, if I'm honest with you. I know people talk about this healthy work-life balance and switching off, but because you're being it and it's a part of you, it's not something that you can just switch off and leave when you leave the office or when you shut down your laptop, for example, or when 5 o'clock comes. And that's what's difficult about this approach, is because you start to see things, start to see the world, people, etc., from a different lens altogether. So I think it's really unrealistic for us to think about that you can switch it off. So that's why engaging in practices like clinical supervision, reflective practice, having that support from your workplace, having that time to process and debrief as well is really important, so you can process the trauma, because it is trauma that you're exposed to indirectly, and we know that as precarious trauma. So it's making sure you've got those practices in place and having that space to actually process it, because otherwise, as we know, that trauma will process through the body and you'll start to have physical symptoms, and if you don't process it, then your body will definitely make you stop and process it. So thank you again, and I look forward to meeting with you all next week.